Good morning, everybody. Happy Saturday. Welcome to a show. It's been a while since I've actually been online and done any content, so I figured I'd be covered a couple of things here. This one kind of caught my attention, and it's something I've been mulling over since, some of these issues for years. So I kind of wanted to get into this and talk about what I think are some really big mistakes uh, between discussions amongst believers and skeptics, the great debate, and all that good stuff. So we're going to go over that, and hopefully this won't be too long. Hopefully I don't ramble too much. But yeah, let's get started. So for anybody that kind of watches these kinds of this kind of YouTube content, mine and others, the constant back and forth about the existence of God, the status of believers, the nature of belief itself, doxastic involuntarism or voluntarism, all that good stuff gets bandied about a lot. And when it does happen, in a lot of cases, there seems to be lots of little camps start to form and these kinds of things. But one of the things that I've noticed, and this has been kind of a unique one, and this does involve Pine Creek, my favorite YouTube commentarian, is that he believes that he has discovered, and he's not the first one to do this, but he's sort of acting like it, or at least he's putting himself in the position of being the spokesperson for this viewpoint within these tiny circles, that there is a disconnect or a contradiction in the way that certain atheists are talking about some of their issues. They're hypocrites in the sense that they are intolerant to people who identify as Christians, but they feel sorry for the people who identify as trans, man, woman, whatever. Now, anybody within the trans community knows that this is already suspicious, right? And already is like an incredibly superficial and oversimplified take on the problem. But there is an issue with it. And to some extent, atheists, online atheists especially, do share some of the blame in the way they go about attempting to deal with misinformation or deal with disinformation, especially if it involves things like religious claims and things like this. So I wanted to get into that a little bit. And it all kind of involves one short that Doug did just a little while ago. I don't know, maybe a week ago, maybe not even that long. And so I'm going to throw that up here and we'll get into that. Let me say hello to a few people here. Michael Dayton is here. Morning. Good to see you. This is an early stream. Yeah, I've been up since 5. I turned in early, so yeah. Good morning from the Ozarks. I think I have some form of PTSD from the election. I mean, you wouldn't be the only one. Coco's is enjoying this. It's 1:30 p.m. where he is. So yeah, this is great. This is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to reach out. I'll do these at weird hours now, so try to expand my my European audience. I'm tired of online atheism, especially Dillahunty. He's so 2013. The general impression that I'm getting from everything is that everybody is tired of everything, except for MAGA folks who, for some strange reason, are not tired of Trump, which I really did think that everybody was tired of him. But 77 million can clearly be wrong. So we're going to get into this, just this one short here. And I kind of want to preface this with something that I shared in the description. There is Alex O'Connor from Cosmic Skeptic has an interview, a relatively recent one. It's about an hour and a half video. The link is in the description. He has an interview with Rainn Wilson, or Dwight Schrute from the American version of The Office. And I believe Rainn Wilson is Baha'i. He's of the Baha'i faith. And so they have a discussion about religion and Rainn Wilson's book on spirituality and a variety of other topics. But I haven't seen the entire thing from beginning to end, but I've seen a variety of clips from them, different shorts that other people have clipped and O'Connor has. And some of the things that I've heard from Rainn Wilson really kind of echo some of the sentiments that I've had in the past and things that I still have now. And I think that in some ways, I think it's informative for atheists to listen to content like that from people who are kind of in the, I don't know, the Pete Enns, Pete Holmes kind of mystery aspect of religion, where, they're not really interested in religion. They're interested in some kind of pursuit of spirituality. They seem to have an impression or a thing in their head that inclines them to believe that there is a consciousness, a universal mind, a creator, a something, the force, whatever it is, right? And I kind of identify those people as believers. And I've been in discussions with people like that for a long time. I don't do a lot of discussions now, but in the past, when I've had discussions with believers on Discord or Clubhouse or a variety of other ones, when I get to a point where a person is convinced of the existence of a higher power because of a subjective emotional experience, it really is kind of game over in terms of what you can talk about. Because at that point, there really isn't anything that you're going to do to kind of convince this person that what they felt isn't real, right? They felt something happened to them. And in most cases, even some of the most, diehard, somebody like an Aaron Ra or something like that, who's an apistivist and, doesn't, faith is awful, kind of person, really can't get past that. If a person has had an experience like this, you can't really argue with a feeling or an impression or just a sort of general inclination towards thinking that this is a possibility. What you can later actually take on are claims that believers make when they make the jump from, I think there's this thing out there, a higher power, and it wants you to vote Republican, or it believes that the country's only great if we outlaw abortion, or it wants you to, it wants you to donate 10% of your income every year to the church, this kind of stuff. When you try to make that jump from the one to the other, the basic non sequitur becomes really obvious. And that's sort of the difference, I think, between a distinction between believers and the religious, because you start adding dogma. And I think the most important thing about what atheists can talk about is dismantling dogma. It's not about breaking a believer. It's not about trying to convince them that their feelings about the possibility of a higher power are wrong or irrelevant or incorrect or any of those kinds of things. They may very well be, but that's not really the point. The issue is if that individual has those kinds of inclinations, has those feelings, and then they either leverage them into a dogmatic approach in one direction, or they get leveraged by other people influencing them to apply dogma in these certain directions because of their belief. That's where I think the malfunction happens. Doug would like you to believe, and this is sort of an example of it, that atheists, a lot of atheists, because many atheists are progressives and humanitarians and humanists, are making a real problem here, because while they are critical of individuals that identify as Christians, they're not critical of people who identify in the trans sense. This is a massive category error, and I'm going to show this short to show what's going wrong here. So, also, this particular short does feature AI manipulation of Matt Dillahunty's words in the second half. It's only about 30 seconds long, so we'll play this and get on it.
How can we detect your gods?
Because I exist, because you exist. And
you are not a god and I am not a god. You are not a god and I am not a god. I can demonstrate that I exist in reality, as can you. Neither of us, in my view, are a god. If you want to say that you and I are gods, congratulations. You now have a useless definition of God. It doesn't fit within a classical definition of God. It doesn't do anything other than apply a God label to something else. How can we detect you're a woman?
Because I exist, because you exist.
You are not a woman and I am not a woman. Neither of us, in my view, are women. If you want to say that you and I are women, congratulations. You have a useless definition of woman. It doesn't fit with any classical definition of woman. It doesn't do anything other than apply a woman label to men. How can we detect your God?
Okay, so that's the whole thing, right? So, and down there in the title, I identify as a god versus I identify as a woman. Atheist hypocrisy. Ooh, Doug, he's out to get us all. Doug has also been increasing his outreach and trying to show that he alone is really only he's the one big brained enough to be an atheist because he's an atheist and a cultural conservative, right? So he can take on all comers. He doesn't need community. He's a Sigma male. He doesn't feel sorry for anyone. I'm not saying sorry because that's how I pronounce it. I'm just teasing him a bit. Apologies to Canada for Doug. And also, how dare you? We've had to deal with him for, I think he said he's been here a decade, maybe more. Anyway, so Doug is all that is atheism, and he's out here trying to put this out there. There is a very basic problem with what Doug is doing. I am reasonably certain that Doug has had conversations with me and with trans people in the past, because Doug has always been the type to complain. I just want to have conversations with trans people and ask them questions and figure out what's going on. He's had those discussions. People have explained a lot of these topics to him. They seem to have gone in one ear and out the other. So I'm going to start with the problem with this video is that Doug, just in the title, Doug does not understand what identify means. He still doesn't get it. The reason that he doesn't get it is because it is very clear that in right-wing circles, identify is interpreted as style. It's interpreted as a lifestyle choice. This is no different than the kind of hostility and bigotry that was directed at homosexual people. Orientation wasn't understood by critics. It still isn't understood by many of them now. I have raised the issue that I think that orientation is not understood by Doug. I don't think he understands sexual orientation as a desire. I think he still thinks of orientation as a verb. You're gay if you have these sex acts, not if you desire these particular sexual partners. I don't think he gets that. And even though I'm saying this right now, I think I'm kind of explaining this in a way that it would be simple enough even for a 10-year-old to get it. Doug will not. The identifying portion that they seem to be talking about is an issue that it's counterintuitive. It's difficult, I think, even for trans activists to explain. I'm going to attempt to, even though I'm not a trans activist and I'm not trans. I think a healthy way of looking at the identify thing, the unhealthy way, I should say. We'll start with the unhealthy way. The unhealthy way of looking at identify is like they bought a new hat or they got a new haircut. I'm feeling feminine today, or I'm feeling masculine today. That's not quite it. It is not a fashion choice. It is not an arbitrary decision. It is not a style. They are trying to communicate to people when they say they identify as, this is how I experience myself. That is what I believe is the healthiest way of looking at it, right? They're trying to tell you who they are. Someone like Doug is responding to those people and saying, you're wrong. I understand who you are better than you do because I'm Doug. That's it. So Doug doesn't seem to be capable of understanding. Like, I know he's not capable of understanding that there's a difference between empathy and pity. He seems to think that they're the same thing and that therefore they're bad. But he also does not understand that if you are the person in an exchange and someone is trying to honestly express to another person who they are, and the person receiving that message, their response is, I know your thoughts and feelings better than you do, that person is an asshole, right? And probably has a lot going on. Like, a lot of what they're doing is expressing something in a way that is clearly not cool. They're kind of telling on themselves. And Doug has been doing this for quite a while. Now, I did comment on this, and I think I made the comment of something like, Doug doesn't understand how identify works or whatever. And Doug posted a very passive aggressive response. Oh, if only I had the same knowledge that you do. Stop feeling sorry for trans activists. My response to him was, well, I will as soon as you stop feeling sorry for yourself. I thought you were aware of this. Haven't you talked up to people about this issue, the issue of what it means when a trans person says they identify in some way? I have not gotten a response to that. I don't think that I will. And I'm reasonably certain the answer is yes, he has spoken to them. He has either ignored them or he disagrees with them, but for some strange reason won't just openly admit that he rejects it. In the same way that I can't get him to admit that if you ask Doug, is your position that trans people are simply delusional? Is that a go-to thing for you? He will dodge that. He will tap dance around it. But the way he does these videos, it's pretty clear that that's the position that he's coming from, even though it is a demonstrable fact that trans people aren't delusional. But Doug is approaching the issue as if they are. So he's just wrong from the jump. He's been accused of doing this for a long time, and by responding to him, I'm kind of engaging in the same thing where we're kind of doing this stuff where trans experiences, the real lived experiences of trans people, end up becoming fodder for debate with online chat bros like myself, like Doug. It's pretty simple to explain that their lived experience, that is a reality. It's not a debate. Doug wants to debate that reality isn't real. So, as far as I'm concerned, this makes him wrong from the start in so many of these discussions. And it makes a lot of his opinions about this issue irrelevant because he did go out and make the effort to be like, I want to talk to trans people about this. And trans people took him up on it. Stephanie Helms, the woman here, why am I blanking on her name? With Matt Dillahunty, she's spoken with him at least once, possibly more. She does not like him. Dr. Ben, also, actually, the two of them combined, they had him on as a guest and spoke with him for quite a while about some of the issues that he brought up. It was not a productive discussion because despite any of the information they shared with him, he continued to go on and make content. Actually, his content got worse. The more he spoke with people, the more he would reach out and claim, I just need to talk with them. I'm just asking questions. I just want to have these conversations. His content got worse. It became more degrading, more condescending, and more ignorant over time. Jay says, listening back on that, did the caller really mean to identify as a god or just the human existence as evidence for the god? I don't know. There's a comment in the comments where Doug is trying to tell somebody, I think he's trying to provide context for what the original caller said, but it doesn't make sense. It almost sounds like maybe he doctored the original thing where the guy is saying he identifies as a god. I don't know to what degree the audio in this has been doctored beyond where it's obvious Matt Dillahunty is no longer saying what he actually said. Does Doug believe in conversion therapy, religious based or not? As far as I know, when it comes to the homosexuality issue, I've stated this before. I don't think that Doug understands orientation. I think he thinks that gay is a verb. Whether he believes in, I don't think he cares. I think he takes the kind of sloppy libertarian thing. Well, once you're 18 and out of the house, you can have sex with whomever you want. Go do you kind of thing. That sort of live, laugh, love, wine mom kind of approach to it. I really think he's that lazy when it comes to it. So conversion therapy, I don't think he can be bothered with it. That's my opinion. With trans people, I think with that, he is legitimately inculcated about the idea of people having a gender experience incongruent with their biological sex. He cannot wrap his head around it. I think that it is extremely exciting to him in ways that maybe he has not really dealt with, and he is struggling to cope. This is the way that he copes. This is essentially him going out and pulling girls' pigtails. At best, at worst, he's like, shoving them into ditches or pushing them in front of buses and trains. Rhetorically speaking, people. I'm not saying that he's out there actually harming people. Hey, Scholar Fiction, good to see you. Yeah, you like that? Yeah, I'm kind of copying your thing. Let's see. If a man can identify as a woman, then it's perfectly logical for a man to be able to identify as a vroom vroom car. Lol. There's the problem, right? Because that's essentially what this guy is doing. If that is in fact how this set up, if I were Matt Dillahunty, this is kind of getting back to the religious thing. This is how I would have set this up. As soon as why can't I identify as a god? We've heard this before from these guys. Why can't I identify as an ATM machine? Why can't I identify as a whale? Why can't I identify as this? Because that's not your experience. That's not, you're not paying attention to what's being communicated when somebody says they identify as this. And in the case of a god, this person is actually committing a category error, and they're talking about something that would be externally based. If he identifies as a god, then he should be able to demonstrate that he is one. The difference between a god and a human would that he would have more abilities, many more abilities than a human would. So he should be able to prove that. He probably can't, so it's not going to go anywhere. If a person is saying they identify as a man or a woman, and it's incongruent with their biological sex, they're talking about how they experience themselves. Not how they experience the outside world around them, but how they feel about themselves. And that's where the belief thing comes in, because, like, as I said up in the beginning, I think there is a little bit of an overlap there when you're talking about a believer, generally a believer, a person who is under the impression that there is some kind of higher power in general, a consciousness, a force, a mystery, whatever you want to call it. And I think in those cases, there really isn't anything that you need to discuss there. If a person's inclined to think that, I think that's worth doing. Now, if somebody is trying to say, if that believer is trying to justify that impression by appealing to external things around them, I got here because of this kind of stuff, that's when you can start kind of poking holes in it, because now they're appealing to things that are, external in the real world, right? As opposed to them experiencing themselves, experiencing the external. And that is a nuanced point there. I have a feeling that Doug will come in here and is like, well, how can you be a man, a biological man, and not experience being a man? Because your internal experience can differ from the external experience that that is happening to you. If you are wondering what that's like, if you've ever had a transcendental moment or a moment of awe in nature, congratulations, give yourself a cookie. You have experienced yourself experiencing something. And I think that that's important to understand when people are talking about trans people trying to say they identify as something. They are not talking about selecting a haircut or buying a wardrobe or even getting a sex change. They are talking about how they experience themselves, and they're trying to share that with you. And somebody like Doug is pushing back and going, wrong. You are not, in fact, who you are. You are who I say you are. Because I can see what you are, and it's just, that's it. So that's a real problem. Yes, Arden, thank you. I don't know why I was blanking on her name. Good to see you, Ailey's fake name. So this has been an issue for me for a while, because I think when atheists are trying to tamp down on notions of belief or believers, it does not matter to me one bit if a person is inclined to think that there is a mystery, a higher power, a greater consciousness. If they say, I identify as a believer, rather than say, I don't know, a skeptic or something like that, if that even matters. But they are the kind of person that is overawed or merely awed when they experience nature, when they hold their child, when they have a conversation with a person. You hear these kinds of people talk about, everyday miracles and that kind of thing. That is part of, they're trying to describe an experience that they have. And I think that that is legitimate. It is slightly categorically different than what trans people are doing. I do want to emphasize that. But when somebody tries to say, and this is the problem that Doug makes, I identify as a Christian, that's different. Because you've gone from the kind of person who experiences a feeling of connection to a higher power, a feeling of awe, potential of some kind of mysterious thing beyond the reality that we know, to then making a connection. I have to attend church once a week. I have to pledge allegiance to Jesus. I'm being facetious. I have to admit that I'm a sinner and accept his salvation for me. I have to accept the principles of the concept of the Trinity, yada yada. Then you start attaching dogma to it. When somebody starts saying that they identify as a Christian in that sense, all they're saying is that they are aligned with that. They're using identify in a different way. This should not be this complicated. What Doug is trying to do here is muddy the water. This is not necessarily an example of hypocrisy, because categorically two different things are going on here. What Doug would really like us to do as atheists is to be as inhuman as possible when dealing with this, I think in both ways. But to give him some credit, I think he's slightly correct when he's pointing out that this can sound hypocritical. I think that that's true. If atheists are trying to go after people who just sort of have a general feeling of belief about a higher power, rather than the dogmatists that go out there and try to sell you on Methodism or Catholicism or Orthodox Christianity or something like that. But where he's gone wrong with this is that he is attempting to say that what I think is coming across with this is that these atheists are surrendering to pity, and they're leaving their critical faculties at the door. And I don't see that as actually happening here. I think what Doug is trying to do is try to pat himself on the back and say, I'm the one that's consistent because I'm against everybody. I really do think it's as simplistic as that. He's the contrarian, the master contrarian. He's the only one that's big-brained enough to handle his level of atheism. Everyone else is merely coping. If you listen to him talk, atheists that defend humanist issues or trans issues or any of these other kinds of things, those people, he's accused me of this, he's accused many other people, they are clearly suffering from something, or they suffered from something. They were abused as a child, they were impoverished in some way, someone touched them in a bad way. And that's the reason why they gravitate to this, because they cannot overcome their pity. They can't be hard-headed, they can't be firm thinking enough to be the kind of atheist that Doug is. But Doug's not a good atheist, because Doug has in the past, on his own standards, I'm saying he's not a good atheist in his own standards, because I've heard him give that kind of pass to somebody who's just saying, well, no, that's sort of the way I feel about it. If they're not particularly dogmatic and they're just saying, no, I don't know if that the Eucharist is correct, or there's a Trinity, or there's sin and we were saved and we were created in a garden. I have no idea. I don't think any of those stories are legitimately real or actually the case. But I think there's some kind of higher power. And Doug has been, oh, well, in that case, what are we going to talk about? Doug would probably reduce that to saying, oh, well, then we're just talking about your feelings. He would minimize it, reduce it, and then reject it. And I think he missed an opportunity there, because if he had paid attention to that, if he had reflected on that, I think a little bit longer, he might be in a better situation to be able to communicate with trans people. My expectation of Doug is not that he pick up the cause of trans people. There's no way in hell he's ever going to be an advocate. That's not my issue. But Doug fancies himself an online communicator, and he's doing a shit job of communicating anything. I'll give you an example. One of these other shorts up here.
So
we don't...
Immutability. Is transgender status immutable? Does transgender status apply to individuals who are gender fluid?
I think that the distinguishing characteristic is to have a birth sex that does not align with, or a gender that does not align with one's birth sex. So it may include people who have different understandings of their gender identity, but I think it is still the distinguishing characteristic of a birth sex and a gender identity that are incongruent.
Are there individuals who are born male, assigned male at birth, who at one point identify as female, but then later come to identify as male? Are there not such people?
There are such people. I agree with that, Justice.
So it's not an immutable characteristic, is it?
Well, I think people's understanding of it shifts.
Immutability is.
So, according to Pine Creek, Justice Alito demolishes the idea that transgender status is immutable, unable to change. What Justice Alito failed to understand there is that the status of a genderqueer individual, gender fluid individual, might be immutable. They might always experience both. Some people in the trans community would say, well, a lot of people that are in that kind of category of being gender fluid or gender queer or non-binary, they might be exploring. They may not have figured out exactly what where they stand on it. And some people end up becoming kind of agender or non-binary permanently. They just reject the entire thing. They don't really feel themselves as being one or the other, but somewhere in between. So this is not he's not demolishing the idea that transgender status is immutable. And I think Doug is doing this because, and Alito is asking these questions in a way. Alito is doing a kind of nut picking here. If you can point to the gender fluid person who one day experiences themselves as feminine and then the next day experiences themselves as masculine, oversimplifying the whole thing, then transgender is not immutable. The immutability is not fixity. It's not based on whether or not they are man and they are born a male but identify as a female. They were born a female but identify as a man. It's not based on that kind of fixity. I hope I got those right. The immutability is the experience, how they are experiencing themselves. That is what one should acknowledge instead of trying to play games with this kind of stuff. So Doug has just kind of goofed it up. I did pop a link in there if anybody wants to join. I know it's really early in the morning and there's no pressure to do that. Let's see. Can someone write the short version of the identity argument from Doug? I have to, I mean, good to see you, Fabio, by the way. I have to kind of assume what I think his identity argument is. I really do think that for Doug, the identity argument really boils down to somebody just choosing to be a way. In the same way, that critics of the homosexual population, same-sex people, same-sex oriented individuals were choosing a lifestyle by hooking up with people of the same sex. Gay was an action that you did. It was a thing that you chose to do. It wasn't based on your attraction to people of the same sex. They made it about choices that you made. And a lot of the reasons why I think that it happens is because of Christianity. You could be tempted, but don't act on it. And so it's easier to think about things, I think, in that way. So, hey, howdy, Mark. Good to see you. Are you on screen? There we go. Can you hear me? Maybe he can't. I can't tell if he froze or not. Let's do that. I had trouble with this last time.
Yeah, okay. No sound was coming through. I just had to muck around with the stereo settings. That's okay. The audio settings.
Okay.
So, yeah, my apologies. There was no sound.
No, that's not a problem. The last time I tried to bring in, last time I was online, I tried to do a thing where I ended up using StreamYard instead because the link never worked. So.
Oh, okay. Well, it definitely worked. It's just no sound from your end, which was the audio of the Streamlabs. But that's okay. It's all working now. I can hear you fine. Obviously, you can hear me fine. So, crisis averted. I've never actually interacted with Doug very much. I have not heard great things about him, though.
Yeah, and a few years ago, you probably would have. But yeah, lately he's kind of ducked into the kind of culture warrior, conservative, stuff. And I do want to point this out. As an atheist, I accept some people suffer from dysphoria. Normalizing dysphoria psychosis is not a good word for. Okay, people who are dysphoric are not all transgender people are dysphoric. So
Yes.
it sounds like you're equating dysphoric people with transgender. So that's a mistake. Also, dysphoria can be a condition that people who are trans can suffer from because of an overwhelming feeling of incongruency between their biological sex and the way they feel about their gender. That's essentially all dysphoria is. The transgender identity portion of it, if you're trying to say like, well, normalizing dysphoria, it sounds like to me what you're kind of getting into as well, we should not be feeding these people's delusions. The reason that psychologists and medical scientists, medical professionals have determined that trans identity is real and not a delusion is because when you're dealing with other cases of delusion, when you feed the delusion, the person gets worse. They become more agitated. It actually starts to kind of accelerate and blows up. When you recognize a trans person's actual reality, you provide actual gender affirming care, which starts with just basic conversation, therapy, that kind of thing. They improve. That is indication number one that what you're dealing with is separate from delusion. So I would encourage you, Odin Allfather, to look into this more because you are running on some assumptions that you are getting from media that are just incorrect. So
yeah. You're applying the idea that everybody who is trans has some kind of disorder, and that is not the case. Gender dysphoria and any disorder is usually when it causes significant, disorder in their lives, when it actually affects their lives in a very negative way, and not all trans people fall into that category. Also the problem with saying, hey, they're delusional is, what are they delusional about? Do they think they were born a biological man? Of course not. They don't think that. So delusion is when your perception of reality does not match reality. And trans people are under no delusions about how they were born. So exactly what are they delusional about would be my question.
Right. Yeah. If anything, yeah, most of it comes from the fact that they're trying to express, hey, they acknowledge the biological reality of themselves and the incongruence. The problem is when somebody tells them, oh, no, you're crazy if you feel that way. And it's just that's crazy making. I mean, it's incredibly frustrating. They're trying to express this idea like, no, I don't feel what I am in the same way that I think other people do. And when they're presented with things like from guys like Pine Creek, like, no, you don't. I don't think you understand. I think that you were abused in some way, or you feel sorry for the wrong people, or too many people, or just these kind of pat things like, well, the problem is you're a tree hugging liberal, and you need to buck up, Buttercup, and then you will no longer be trans. And it's like that's like push-ups and prayer as a remedy for everything. Like that's not going to work.
Well, there's actually some really fascinating research on the neural structures of people who are trans, and their brains appear to have a neural structure of the gender they identify with, not the one that they were born with. Now, to be perfectly fair, more research has to be done because we don't know if the neurology is something you're born with or whether that develops over time. We don't know. But if it is either a genetic or a prenatal kind of neural structure that you just come out with, you may have just been born that way. If that's the case, then you're just being an asshole, just saying, hey, be something else when you were born that way.
Yeah.
So to the Christians out there, I'd usually ask, well, why is it possible that God's going around putting the wrong brain in the wrong body? What's that all about?
I think the impression that I get from them is like, well, we all have our temptations, and you just have to, you know, punch that down. You know, you have to conform to this dogma if you want to, you know, if you want to succeed, and if you don't, you're a failure. You know, and it's like, who told you that? Like my pastor. Like, okay, so who touched you in the bad place to think that that was legitimate advice?
Right.
Tom, why is immutability a factor? The immutability is a factor in this Supreme Court case, because Tennessee is there was a ban on transgender care for minors. Immutability is coming up in arguments because the idea is, well, if we allow care for minors, what about those who will regret it and want to change back or something like that? So the immutability thing has become a, you know, are they okay? So if they decide that they're you know, it's a boy but he wants to be a girl, has he really committed to that kind of thing? Also, the one thing that gets kind of blown out of proportion is the instances of people who have regretted the transition portion of it. The way that a lot of anti-trans people tend to take that is that they ended up reverting from being trans. They didn't. That's a category error. They had some issue with a procedure that they pursued, a transition process that they pursued, and they regretted going in that direction or going that far, you know, for them. That doesn't mean they regret being trans, and it doesn't mean that they stop being transgender. It just means that they had a suboptimal outlet when it came to that particular procedure. And not a lot of people that talk about that. No, well, what about the rates of regret? The rates of regret, when I hear that being said, I'm hearing conservatives transmit to each other rates of regret of being trans, not rates of regret of people who got a medical procedure that they didn't like the outcome of. That's an important distinction to make. So,
yeah, and there was a JAMA surgery report that suggested that less than 1% of people actually regretted transitioning, which is incredibly low, and certainly not what you hear from the right when you hear about, oh, tons of people were regretting their choices kind of thing. That's not actually true.
Yeah, there are more people that reject you know, kind of resent after the fact their knee surgery or hip surgery than resent any kind of
their breast augmentation surgery. Like there's women that get that, and then, you know, they regret having it because of complications. We don't say, well, you know, let's stop offering it to people. I don't know why that's a thing. What
do you say to the Napoleon objection? We don't treat people who identify as being Napoleon as if they were. That's because that's the difference. Again, Mark and I were just talking about that. If you are dealing with somebody who they are convinced that they are Napoleon, if during treatment you decide to feed into that delusion, you will watch them get worse. That is the distinction. A delusion, trans identities are not delusional. That those are actual experiences, and psychologists that this is documented. There's a clear distinction between the two. The sooner that people understand that and just accept that a trans experience is not delusional, then this stuff will stop happening. Because every time you hear, like, what about the guy that just says he's a pony? Like, that person is probably experiencing some kind of delusional thing that maybe they're not. Maybe there's something else going on. It could be something biological. They may be experiencing some kind of tumor. They need medical attention. They need to be addressed. But you can tell a delusion from trans experience. Professionals can tell. So it's important to keep that distinction where it is. And that's really all there is to say about that.
And it seems to come down to this belief that gender roles within our society are inextricably and unable to be separated from biological sex. Like, there is this idea that everything that makes a woman, you have to have the sexual organs of a woman in order to fulfill that role in society. And that's it. But none of the things that we recognize as being a woman or womanly walking down the street are things that you are born with or due to your genetics or what have you. None of it. Whether they have long hair, whether they have, you know, a slimmer waist, there's nothing that sort of is something that you would automatically have to have as a biological woman.
Yeah. hell, I mean, I remember getting criticized by a roommate that I had who was a girl. I went on a date with someone who and she was Asian, and she had a slim build and kind of broad shoulders. And she's like, "Well, the girl that you went out with looks like a man." And I was like, "Okay, that's rude." Like,
Yeah.
she's slim and she's kind of slim with an athletic build. Like, I'm not exactly sure what just it was just a shitty thing to say. And I was like, okay, all right. But yeah, I mean, a lot of that stuff is built into that. But yeah, on top of just being superficial, the notion that to what extent does a woman cease being, it becomes less of a woman if you start taking that into account. So as soon as a woman is no longer able to bear children, she's less than.
Yes.
So yeah,
I find great discomfort with that. A woman who's had to have mastectomies because of cancer, is she now not a woman because she doesn't have breasts? Is that what we're saying now?
Right,
Well,
exactly.
If she is still a woman, then the whole breast thing, well, that's nothing to do with being a woman then.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a nuanced thing, and a lot of the debate bros on here are, I think, just they're doing an enormous amount of damage to it. And I think the reason for the appeal is that there is, I don't know about in Australia, but in the United States, obviously, as a result of our election, there is a significant number of people who are motivated to attack others in this country. They are genuinely upset by the existence of some of their fellow Americans and bought into the idea that their lives would be better if those people ceased to be.
It's incredible how they've just been used to find others in society, the sort of scapegoat in society, and then buy into, the horrendous choice that you've made to somehow fix the country by getting rid of immigrants and trans people. I don't know how do you actually connect the dots on that one?
Exactly.
I want to know, like, how does that actually work?
I was talking to somebody, and I actually think it was somebody from work, and we were talking about the election results, and I was trying to figure out exactly how far gone the Republican Party has been, because normally American conservatives are not the party of redistribution, right? The idea, you tax from the wealthy and then you give it to some undeserving layabout in a hammock. That's the mindset, right? And I'm like, okay, so redistributive wealth, bad. J.D. Vance, during the vice presidential debate, essentially said that their housing policy was their deportation policy, because once they kick these people out of their homes and remove them from the country, it frees up all this housing for others. I'm like, so you're going to remove them and then give their homes to other people, let the market, that is a redistribution policy. Not only that, but it completely misses wait, if an undocumented immigrant is living in a home, how do they own it? Like, oh, well, their wife does or their husband does. I'm like, oh, okay, so they're living with somebody. So when they're removed, their house doesn't get freed up. Or are you going to take it from their spouse who legally owns? Like, how does that work? Like, it's a complete fucking fantasy. And there were kids that were like, oh, I kind of like the cut of J.D. Vance's, I like the cut of his jib. I like, they would never say that. That's just way too old fashioned. But they're like, oh yeah, he really comported himself well. I'm like, he sold horse shit. That is a horse shit cockamamie idea that he was putting out there. Once these people are removed, then all their homes are yours. Help yourselves. Like, okay. Like at that, normally if somebody had said something that fucking stupid in a primary, the Republican or Democratic Party would have made sure that person was removed. But now these people are getting rewarded because they're like, well, you know what? They poll well. The public is gravitating towards it. And it's like, well, the public is being pumped full of so much misinformation in this country. 55% of Americans are getting their news from Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter.
Yeah.
And it's even higher amongst Spanish-speaking people. And Spanish-speaking sources of online social media news is 20% higher in misinformation content. So when they were like, well,
they'll find out. Because the same thing happened with Brexit, right? They made all of these, the right made all of these claims, like when we get away from the EU, all of this money will come back to the NHS and we'll be able to fix everything. And, not understanding that they're not giving money to the the EU, they're abiding by their regulatory practices and saying it costs them so much money, but there was no money coming. So afterwards, people were angry because they had promised all of this stuff would happen, and of course it didn't happen because it was a bunch of bullcrap. That's what's going to happen. People are going to expect houses to free. They're not going to free up. Most of the places that are, we're talking about illegal immigrants are living. They're not places that your average American want to live in. They're just not. It's just the whole idea that this is going to fix things is ridiculous. I mean, they've announced a trade war with Canada and Mexico, their two biggest trading partners. And, even if that does bring work back to the US, they don't have the workforce to maintain that industry. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard.
And any economist will tell you, this is sort of like the idea. You even get this in sort of Econ 101 classes. If a country wants to establish itself as being dominant in a market or in an industry that it doesn't have, kind of a natural advantages, it has to invest in it. Like, look, the classic example is like Swiss optics. The Swiss do not have some kind of natural geographical advantage to making lenses, but they invested a shitload of money and training into it. And now, generationally over time, they just have this kind of built-in, legacy of that. And it's like, so it's demonstrated, like, if you want this stuff, direct federal investment into those industries is the way to go. The notion that you're going to we'll start a trade war, we'll impose these tariffs, it'll raise prices on foreign goods, and that'll create this impetus in the market where people will react to that and be like, you know what, I'm tired of these expensive Chinese sneakers, I'm going to start making them here. But you impose that kind of thing in there, but then you don't lift any of the, in the case of, so say it is sneakers, the case of manufacturing, say something like Crocs, which is an entirely EVA foam shoe. It goes against certain environmental regulations that we have in the US. So it's like, okay, now it costs $150 to buy a pair of Crocs. What we need is an American equivalent to Crocs. We'll make them here, but you can't. So everybody just pays $150 for Crocs.
And even if you could, you're going to have to use American labor with labor laws that force you to pay a certain amount for those workers as opposed to Chinese workers. The cost of making them is going to be so much higher. So the product will come out costing so much more.
Yeah. On top of that, too, even if you do have a relatively robust domestic competitor in place, depending on the tariff that you do, if it raises prices to a certain degree, it's an encouragement for the domestic product to also go up in price. They just have to make sure it doesn't meet or exceed the foreign product, but they can, so it just raises prices throughout. So depending on how they apply it. And in some cases, tariffs can be applied in a way where the cost sort of gets absorbed in supply chains and it's not totally passed down to customers, but somebody ends up paying more. And it's the fantasy that Donald Trump is taxing China. There was a guy, what's his name? David Pakman was on a podcast with the guy. That's supposed to be a business podcast. And this kid was a Trump supporter. He's a younger dude. And they were talking about this. And Pakman has to explain, China does not pay that tariff. And the Chinese company does not pay for that tariff. The American company that bought that material from China, that Chinese company, they have to pay the tariff. And this kid was just dumbstruck. Just, wait, what? And Pakman's like, please make a clip of this. This is extremely important. Even you didn't get this, and you're in this environment talking about these issues, and you didn't understand that, this basic campaign promise, we're going to have plenty of money in the federal, in federal revenue because we just impose a tax on Chinese companies or Canadian companies. That is not how that works.
Well, the one thing I was thinking was, and let me know what you think of this, because it really just was a thought that went across my head last night. I was thinking maybe it is an attempt to respond to Temu, for instance, the Chinese company that is currently outdoing Amazon because it can import stuff incredibly cheap from China, basically. So are they trying to address you would need, I think it would be way better to do a really focused one on online ordering stores, overseas ordering stores. But Is that
Right.
what they're trying to address? Is that the goal?
I don't know. I don't.
Yeah.
I mean, Trump or like the administration. I mean, it's sort of because I have a feeling that there are a lot of people that he's bringing into his cabinet that are not cool with this. The idea of just sort of because it was one thing if it was because I mean some of the tariffs that he put in place, the Biden administration didn't remove. But they kept the EV tariffs from Chinese cars in place. They didn't remove those because they were trying. It was a targeted tariff, and they were trying to bolster production of American EVs because we're behind in China. So anytime somebody tried to bring that up, it's like, well, Biden kept those tariffs. Like, yeah, he did keep some of them. They're targeted. But the idea of just when he just posted on Truth Social, like that's 25% across the board for anything from Canada, 25% for anything from like. That's just stupid, and until you make the fentanyl and the illegals go away. It's like the illegal issue is only a problem because of the way the United States administers its border.
I don't know a whole lot about that, to be honest with you. I won't comment on that.
I won't get into it too much. I mean, there are issues. There are issues with people kind of pushing from those countries into the United States, and we've had several humanitarian crises where people have come because of refugee status, and that gets equated into this like, oh well, immigration is just completely out of control, and it's like, even to the point where people like Pine Creek or any of these others will say like these people are committing crimes. Like technically they're not.
No,
those are civil violations. They're the equivalent of a misdemeanor. It's the same distinction they will make when somebody says, well, Trump's a rapist, and they're like, he was civilly liable.
Right.
They have no problem making that say he wasn't found criminally, guilty. He was found civilly liable. It's like, well, that's the distinction you need to make for those immigrants, because if they were deported and they try to cross again, that's a crime. If they're trying to cross into the country with fake documents or remain with fake documents, that is a crime. But if somebody just, crosses at a non-authorized checkpoint, it is just considered a civil violation, and it's between them and our Department of Border or Homeland Security and that stuff. But the way these guys talk about it, they inflame the issue and then try to say that it's a crisis, and it's just not. I mean, the number of people that need support. And our immigration laws need massive changes, but and Australia's had to deal with that too, because I know Australia had a lot of animosity about the boat people back in the past. I mean,
and that is what's scary about it. And I think that somebody over there maybe paid attention to the sort of slogans they had, like "Stop the boats" kind of thing, and the people taking water transport to Australia are such a tiny percentage, just like the people coming over the southern border are mostly it is people that get a visa and just overstay their visa. That's what most of the illegal immigrants are. They get a travel visa or they get a student visa, and they just don't go home when it expires. That's how most illegal immigrants come to these countries, through legal ports of entry, and then they just don't leave.
Yep. And that was the thing that they found out here. They found out that a lot of the people that would be targeted in a Trump administration deportation push, of the people that are currently residing in the United States who are here illegally, meaning, well, they're here without the proper documentation. They overstayed. Yeah. They came here legally, the tourist visa, educational visa, work visa, and now they no longer. And because of how goofed up our regulations are, if they try to okay, my bad, I need to go and renew my paperwork, they're admitting to have been here illegally. That's now a crime. So they just end up making them, and it's very capricious. Like they might be targeted for deportation, they might not. It's a complete shit show. Yeah. Thank you, Bill Clinton. The immigration laws he signed into effect in the 90s were absolute shit.
Yeah, and Australia has done some reprehensible things and still doing some reprehensible things. There's a detention centre offshore that is absolutely disgusting. We've outsourced detaining people coming over the border, which is just horrendous. Like, that's horrific. I think that if we're going to sort of, put people in a centre and assess them for immigration, then we can at least do it on our own freaking country. I think it's just reprehensible that we've outsourced it. That's terrible. And I'm very outspoken about that. So it's not like sort of we're doing that well ourselves. but you know, I don't know. I get the immigration thing, and we all know that it's crap. You know, we all know it's absolutely terrible. But I don't understand what fixing the trans issues, when they've been around for ages, like trans movement has been around as long as the LGBTQA has been a thing. I don't get what that's supposed to fix. Like all of a sudden people are going to be moral if you stop trans people from being trans. Like what's the outcome here? What are you trying to do?
At the end of the day, it ends up becoming it's grounded in that sort of magical reality kind of thing. Like, you know what? If we can just get the country to all agree on these things, you know, husband, wife, 2 kids, white picket fence, everything will fix itself. And it's like that has never been the case.
No.
And fuck your picket fence. Those are gross. So
these moral outcries never work. Like the satanic panic. Yeah, guess what? Dungeons and Dragons is still around, ladies and gentlemen. It didn't go anywhere. You know, these moral outrages are for political maneuverings. They're not for any actual fixing of problems. They're not. And I just want to point out, bless be he is sitting there going, Trump 2028. Like, if you don't know there's a 2-term limit, how come me, an Australian, knows there's a 2-term limit on presidents and you don't? How is that even possible?
In his defense, I'm going to say, because of the fact that most people, a lot of Americans, especially the 76, 77 million that voted for Trump, would wipe their ass with American norms. They would not care if he petitions for it. I've been guessing, and I said this before in another stream, if he wins, he's going to push for a 3rd term. They will make the argument for that, unless he's getting so daffy that they can't deal with him. I suspect what they'll try to do.
They can't deal with him now.
Yeah, I think that what they'll try to do is shift it to JD Vance. But good luck convincing that dude of that. Like, if he thinks that he needs to stay, he's going to stay. So yeah, buckle up. Although I do have a feeling, I've been talking about this with a person that I talk economics with. I have a feeling it's going to depend on some of the economic policies that get brought in, but we're probably set for something of an economic boom. But our boom is probably going to be based a lot on a credit run and a stock bubble, a stock market bubble, and that could probably go on for another year or two. Where
do you think the bubble's going to form? On which commodities do you think it's going to form?
Just in the stock market, like, I mean, because we're seeing like the S&P 500 and you know, and the Dow kind of steadily increasing. It's getting to this point where everybody's sort of kind of dumping into, because it's not really going. You know, we had the real estate bubble. It's not really going into that, but it seems to be going more into a stock kind of situation. So we could see something of an economic boom in terms of that. The United States is not going to see anything in terms of like lessened inequality in terms of economic outcome. You know, all that stuff is probably going to steadily get worse or remain the same. But
cost of living,
but we're hitting a new business cycle, and so there's kind of a natural progression to these things where that'll probably increase. But the problem with that is that as the market's doing better, if the economy starts to heat up, we'll probably have a credit increase. People will start borrowing more to continue to buy stuff. And then if there is a drawdown, say in 2026, 2027, that combined with some of the policies that he's talking about, essentially eliminating a lot of people out of the workforce. So increasing labor costs, increasing the cost of domestically produced goods, and the tariffs, depending on how those get implemented and for how long. We're getting set up for a nice, like, we're going up the roller coaster and then set for a decent decline. The real trick is whether the timing is going to be, does it start looking bad for them in time for the midterms in 2026, or does it only start looking bad for them, say, 2027 going into 2028 when they've got to defend themselves then? Who knows?
Well, I was watching this thing on, have you ever heard of accelerationism?
Yeah. The idea of just burning it all down, letting it all, kind of churn itself up.
I couldn't help but sort of at least see some kind of echo of that in why some people wanted Trump in there. Like, he's going to burn it to the ground. He's going to stop the, deep state apparatus from going. That that he's going to change the fundamental way the system works. And
Yeah.
I think that there is an element of that. There's an element of, well, let's oh yeah, blessed be he is a woman.
My apologies. Usually people that are that obnoxiously right wing are usually male. So that's
oh
my
no,
bad.
she's very obnoxious. She's very obnoxious. She'll sort of tell you that that God's there, you've just forgotten, kind of thing. And I was raised an atheist, so I don't know how I could forget anything. But yeah, this sort of pre-suppy, mental maneuvering is kind of really funny. But
I do want to hang. A Supreme Court will get rid of all the demon rats. I hope that they do get rid of the Democrats. That way we can actually have communists. So.
Well, I mean, the Democrats, I really hate that. Joe Biden pardoning his son, that is so corrupt. Like, it is such a corrupt move. Don't get me wrong, I have no doubt Trump would do the same. Like he said, he'd never let his daughter get in trouble for anything. I think he's absolutely corrupt. But that is corruption. That is absolute corruption. So,
Yeah, I'm kind of indifferent to it because the problem goes to presidential pardon power anyway. It's been an issue since Andrew Jackson. Or the idea of kind of holding these guys accountable. And as far as pardons go, the pardon that Gerald Ford gave Nixon was just, that still beats all. So I think it's kind of like it. I agree with you that it comes across as completely self-serving because it is. He is just bailing out his own son. Yeah. But at the same time, the United States has never dealt with the fact that there is no limitation on what there are very few limitations on what presidential pardons are for, other than they can't pardon you for a state level crime or something like that. But,
so are you saying that at least he pardoned his son and didn't assassinate his opponents, kind of thing? Is that the bar that we have really set now, that's the least he could have done?
No, I'm not trying to excuse it in that sense, but at the same time, if you are the kind of person that voted for someone like Trump because you want this kind of change, and then you are clutching your pearls at what Biden did, you voted for the kind of guy that facilitates that kind of behavior across the board. It's going to encourage that throughout the system. So if you want the new system that you voted for as a Trump voter is manifesting in Biden taking care of his son and shielding him from further prosecution. So
are you trying to argue that Trump made it? Well, he pushed the changes necessary for Biden to carry out that action. That is what he pushed through.
Yeah, because I think that the idea, most of it is window dressing from Democrats trying to. I think Biden's biggest mistake wasn't just was promising he would never pardon his son. He never should have committed to that. It should have been a wait and see kind of approach and then go from there. According to what I've read, it was what was his name? Senator Clyburn, who's a long-term friend of Joe Biden, encouraged him to pardon his son. He's like, you should pardon him because they're going to get him, was sort of the thinking. And I disagree a lot with Clyburn on a lot of political ideas, but I don't know that he's not wrong. There is a notion of like, well, Trump didn't need to do that because they got him. Or excuse me, Biden didn't need to pardon, his son because they already got him. They already convicted him of this. Yeah, they were still looking. They're not. The way this usually works with Republicans, and it's very, very important to realize because I grew up as a conservative. When you get a victory in the conservative side, like you get with Trump, you do not back off. You double down. They were coming for that guy. They were going to go after him for more. So in that sense, like, I don't think that what Biden did was right, but I kind of agree with somebody like Jimmy Kimmel. If it was my son, would I do it? Fuck yeah. Those sons of bitches are going after anyone that looks at them cross-eyed. Anybody. And they will continue to. And the reason that they're going to have to, if we do see a recession by 2026 or 2027, they're going to blame Biden. They're going to blame Democrats. They're going to blame minimum wage laws. They're going to blame environmental regulations that by that point they've already gutted. it's going to be, it's just going to be more lack of reality than we already have now. It's going to be a complete and total cartoon. So I'm not upset that he did it, because presidential pardon power, like I said, has been an issue since Ford pardoned Nixon, at least. The idea that that Trump voters are like, see, we told you he was corrupt all along. Like, you did this. Trump does this kind of behavior. If Biden looks bad, it's because he's behaving like the guy you voted for. He's behaving like Trump. And they're trying to say, well, and that's the thing that bugs me the most about this. It's like the standard for Democrats has to be completely pristine. And if they have one chink in their armor, we can accept the Republican troll, warts and all. That makes no goddamn sense. Normally you would be like, well, one is a liar, the other's a liar. My problem is with the number of lies, or it's the problem with the types of things they lie about. People aren't even doing that anymore. They're both liars, but this one's a white rich guy who had a show on for more than a decade. I'll vote for him because I think I'll get a higher paycheck if he's running the show. He represents America. Biden doesn't. He's old and goofy. Kamala doesn't. She's a black woman. That was it. I mean, Americans are really that dumb and that shallow. A lot of them are. So,
okay, well, I mean, yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry to run my countryman down in front of an Australian, but
no, that's fine. We've got our own problems. I was talking to my wife, and I'm like, yeah, it's not like we haven't elected idiots. The only difference is that once we get rid of them, we don't put them back. Like that's the only difference here. We had a guy called Tony Abbott, who we called the Mad Monk, and he was just insane. Like, he was insane.
How long was he around?
Only about 2 or 3 years, because it's the different system over here. Because if the party wants to, they can take out even the prime minister. They can just say, hey, you're not the leader of the party anymore, and therefore you're not the leader of the country anymore. And they can put somebody else in as the leader of the party, because instead of voting for a person, you're voting for a party here. So if the party's like, whoops, this guy's embarrassing, they can actually easily take him out. But then the question comes up, who are the parties responsible to? Are they responsible to the people, or are they responsible to the party? Because if the people can take you out in 4 years and the party can take you out in a second's notice, of course you've got more loyalty to the party than you do to the people. So, but the difference is that we have preferential voting, so we don't have we can vote for a third option here. My local member is an independent. They won this seat from the Liberal Party, which is the more progressive the more conservative party over here. Even though they've held it for like 150 years, they just lost it to an independent.
I mean, because do you guys basically have kind of the same setup as the UK, where it is, they have to form a coalition government, that kind of thing?
Not exactly. So there's two major parties. One of them stands by themselves. It's called the Labour Party, and it's left of the our Conservative Party is kind of like the Democrats, to be honest with you, the Liberals. You have factions, like sort of a more right-wing faction within them, but mostly they're interested in corporations and making capitalism essentially. The Labour Party is more of a workers' party. It looks out for sort of working class people, and that's its sort of goal. The only way that the Conservative Party can get into power is they team up with a country orientated party called the Nationals. So they're sort of country bogans, basically, just country people.
Country bogans. I haven't heard that expression in a while.
There you go. There's always a time. But yeah, I mean, it's just a different system, because with preferential, I can vote for, the Australian Marijuana Party as first, and it doesn't waste my vote, kind of thing. If they don't get in, it just trickles down to the next person.
Yeah, that is I think a better system. Harder to count, but I think it's more fair. Well, Mark, it's been great talking to you. I think I'm going to jump off here. And
no worries at all. Thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure, Jeff. Really.
What time is it there, Mark?
It is 9:45, so getting a little late. I've got to put a presentation together for a debate tomorrow. I'm doing a flat Earth debate on modern day debate, going up against Nathan Thompson. That should be fun.
I haven't heard that name in a long time. He's still doing that. Oh my God.
Apparently so.
Oh, well.
He's probably found someone's car to do it out of or something. Like I don't know what, but every time he's debating, he's from a car or a garage or a cardboard box. You know, it's like, what is up with you, sir? What are you doing?
Well, with that being said, it was good to hear from you. I don't think
take care, mate.
I always enjoy talking with you, and I don't get to talk with you
same.
often enough, but time differences and stuff. But I always like the stuff that you do, and I don't get to check it out enough. So, but I will.
Actually, it's probably easier because it's daylight savings now, so you start a little bit earlier for me, kind of thing. Like just
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, the flat Earth thing I usually don't check into, but if you are debating Nathan Thompson, I might dial in to that.
Well, I'm going to simul stream it to mine. Like I'm going to set up a stream tonight and do all of that kind of thing. So
perfect. Okay,
sit in my chat. So if you don't want to go to modern day debate, then just drop in on mine. That's not a problem.
Hopefully I'll get the notification. But yeah, I'll jump in. What time is it going
on? It is 8 p.m. Eastern time. So that's
perfect.
like 9 o'clock in the morning for me, which is beautiful.
Okay. Gotcha.
All right, buddy. You take care.
Yeah, you too. Take care, Mark. Yep. See ya. All right, folks. I am going to get out of here, and it's been great hanging out. Special thanks to Mark for showing up, and that was pretty much everything that I had to say about the Doug and his trans stuff and some of the newer developments that have happened there. But yeah, thanks for being here. Thank you to everybody in the live chat. Apologies again to Blessed Be He. I did not know that I was misgendering you. I think I've heard other people refer to you as a he and just sort of defaulted to that, so I apologize. With that being said, I'm going to leave, so I hope the rest of you have a great night or day or whatever your time zone is. Take care of yourselves, have a good weekend, and I'll catch you later. See ya.